Well, good evening, everyone. Some of us do not need microphones. That would be me. Thank you for being here with us. We're very excited and thankful again to have Mr. Jim Rickard from Stewardship Services Foundation to share with us. How many of you are here this morning? Worship service? Those of you who were here will understand this. Mr. Jim's assignment this afternoon was to watch 3 Tom Cruise movies. Did you get that accomplished? There probably aren't 3 that we would want to watch as followers of Christ. So, he is going to share on 14 steps to financial freedom tonight. I hope you appreciated this as much this morning's message as I did. Wonderful biblical principles about biblical stewardship, financial stewardship. We're thankful that Mr. Jim is here. Please pray for his ministry. He has the, you can reintroduce the packet that you have up there when you come up. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll bring Mr. Jim up to speak. Father, we are, again, overwhelmed by your grace and your mercy. We know, Father, that none of us are worthy to have a relationship with you, but with your grace and the faith that you've given us and the repentance that you've given us and drawn us to yourself through that faith and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, we can know that our eternity is secure through Christ and the sacrifice he made for our lives on our behalf. We pray, Father, that as we grow and mature in our faith, we would begin to recognize more and more every day that nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to you, and we are simply stewards called to manage the blessings and the graces that you give to us in our lives on a daily basis. Thank you again for Brother Jim and the time that he has spent ministering throughout the world and throughout the United States, and particularly this day in our presence and yesterday as well. Pray that you would be with him, empower him through your Holy Spirit to speak the biblical truths of financial stewardship and responsibility in planning and estate planning. Pray that you would encourage our hearts through the truth of your word. We'll be careful, Father, to give you praise, glory, and honor, for you alone are worthy. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Come on up, brother. Does everyone have a copy of the handouts?
Okay. Yeah, I tried to find the Tom Cruise movie, but I didn't recognize it, so I couldn't. Take your Bibles, would you, and turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians 3:16. We're going to read down to chapter 4, verse 2. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you? That anyone defiles the temple of God, God will bring him to a place of ruin or destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. Let no one deceive himself. We live in a generation of deception. It's easy to be deceived with self-gratification or with worldly wisdom. If anyone among you seems to be wise in his age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, he catches the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. Therefore, let no one boast in men. Be very careful who you put on pedestals. These guys are not heroes, these football players and these Cleveland Indians. Who's the Cleveland Indian fan here? Yeah. All right. I went to a Cleveland-Pittsburgh football game, and it was 8 below. And that, coming off that water, wow. For all things are yours anyway. That's precious. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, all are yours. You are Christ, and Christ is God's. In chapter 4, let a man so consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. The key verse, moreover, is required in stewards that one be found faithful. We are to be trustworthy, loyal servants of God and all that he entrusts into our care. Money's a very big part of that. Very big part of it. All right, as I said this morning, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was the superintendent of a plant in Toledo, made a good wage, And I'll never forget, I would sit down at the dining room table and watch my mother pay the bills. My dad would come home from work, he'd get paid once a month, and he'd give my mother the paycheck, and she would deposit it down at the bank, and then she'd sit down around the dining room table and lay out all the bills and begin to pay the bills. Back in those days, you'd have credit cards. Some of you remember that. You had charge accounts. Every store had its own charge account. I would peek in my mother's purse from time to time. These little leather pouches from each store with the name of the store on the pouch, and inside a metal plate about the size of 2 postage stamps. That was the charge account. And her purse was full. I think she had probably a charge account for every store in Toledo, and probably down to Bowling Green, and maybe Galleon for all I know. And had struggled to pay their bills. There were no seminars back in those days, and they just did what they did. And I can remember sitting down at the dining room table, and I'm about 9, 10 years old. I was just sort of captivated by that. And I just watched her. I'll pay this one 5 this month. I'll give this one 10. I paid this one some last month. I won't pay them this one. And she'd go through that exercise every month. And every once in a while, she'd break down and begin to weep because she couldn't pay the bills. And I'm sitting there watching this as a youngster. And now I'm 12 years old. My cousin Dorothy has just graduated from Moody Bible Institute and feels called to Costa Rica as a missionary. And she just retired. She's in her late 80s now. And so Mom sit down and Dad sit down at the dining room table that night, and they had gotten a letter from Dorothy for support. And they discussed what they could afford to support Dorothy for, came to the conclusion they couldn't afford to support Dorothy. Mom started to cry. Got up at the dining room table, she goes into her bedroom, and I could hear her crying in there. I get up, I walk into the living room, and I'm thinking to myself, something's not right here. I'm 12 years old. I said, something's not right there. And I can remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to live my life like this. I'm 12 years old, think of this. So I didn't have a clue what it was. Anyway, so fast forward, now I graduate from high school, and I'm in college, and I meet my wife. We met in high school. We get engaged while I'm in high school, when I'm in college, not in high school. Her dad would have killed me. I'm in college. And we were engaged for about 2 years. And during our engagement one day, I said to her, honey, we're going to put a financial plan together for our marriage. And we're going to talk about all the things that will affect our marriage financially. And we did that. And we wrote it down. We're going to be givers to the church. We're going to have a budget. I'm in the automotive industry, what kind of cars we want to drive. And I determined that I'm not going to drive a car that massages my ego. It's going to be a car that meets my needs. So that's what we did. That's what you're going to get. My wife and I lived this plan for 55 years. And it's beautiful. It works. It's beautiful. Yes, we both know Jesus Christ. We've had a wonderful marriage. But we've lived the biblical principles of stewardship. If I didn't live it, I'd have no business standing up here teaching it. So you're going to get a little bit of a dose of that tonight. So I trust it will be helpful to you. If you have a question as we go, don't hesitate to ask. So, okay. Are we facing economic Armageddon? I don't know. Nobody knows. We're approaching $21 trillion of debt in this country. We've never been here before. $21 trillion. It's quadrupled since 2007. And we'll probably go to 30 trillion before long. Nobody knows what that means, because we've not been here before. We're becoming a cashless society. 1996, 80% of bills were paid by cash and checks. Last year, the number is 20% of bills were paid by cash and checks. They're paid by credit cards and online now, which probably creates a little more carelessness with how people handle money. To write a check, you're very much aware that the money's going out. When you pay by credit card or online, you don't have that same awareness for many, many people. $21 trillion in debt. Who do we owe money to? 1.4 trillion to China today. 1.5 trillion to Japan. We owe over $800 billion to Russia today. We didn't owe Russia a dime in 2007. Million, billion, and a trillion. What's the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion? Well, a trillion is the one followed by 12 zeros. Let's start there. Let's take $100 bills. Take a stack of 100. It's $10,000. Take 100 stacks, that's $1 million. We put that in a shopping bag. Take 100 million, the shape of a cube, 3 by 3 by 3, 3 by 3 by 3, would fit on an industrial pallet. That would be 100 million. $1 billion would fit on 10 industrial pallets. $1 trillion fits on 10,000 industrial pallets. Think about that. Put it in terms of seconds. A million seconds ago was 12 days. 1 billion seconds ago was 32 years. 1 trillion seconds ago was 32,000 years. We are 32,000 years in terms of seconds times 21 in debt in this country. That's a staggering number. But nobody knows for sure what that means. There's prognosticators and there are doom and gloomers, but nobody really knows what that means. We've just come through some of the most difficult financial challenges of my lifetime. The last recession was very serious. And if anything was learned by people during that last recession is to get out of debt. Get out of needless debt. Control credit cards. Either they're a great tool or a terrible master. For most people in this country, they're a terrible master because they control their lives. What's contributed to the world financial crisis? Entitlements, unions, corruption, overregulation, overtaxation, our spending policies. We support the world. You've heard Trump talk about that. Banks lending policies under Obama. Before Obama, you could borrow money to buy a home, and you'd have to go through 70 different documents to get it done. Now it's over 700 documents to get it done because of regulations. Amazing. Do I worry about all that? No. No. I study this stuff. I teach this stuff. I teach it at the college. Don't worry about it. Don't lose an ounce of sleep over it. You know why? My God is sovereign. So is yours. He's in control. He has a purpose for everything. He decided to allow America to come to its knees the quickest way it could happen to be economically. And we deserve it. We've spat in his face the last 50 years. We've killed millions of babies and no conscience there. What happened to all that? Homosexuality is rampant. On and on it goes. So the Lord decided, okay, America, enough is enough. He could bring us to our knees overnight, economically. It could happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. Don't live there. Like I said, don't worry about it. God is sovereign. He is in control. Okay, take your handouts. Steve touched on it this morning, the principles of worry. That's a good series. Don't worry. All right, 14 steps of financial freedom. The practical side of stewardship. Number 1, give God a chance first. Psalm 37:7 says, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Folks, we are created with an emotion. It's part of our makeup. The challenge is to learn to control the emotions, particularly when you spend money. My wife and I live about 5 miles from the Valencia Mall, one of the largest malls in America. We have a policy that we've had in place for years. We go to that mall, we walk into a store we weren't planning on visiting, we see something we'd like to buy that may be more than $50, we leave the store and take one more walk around the mall. The minute you leave the store, you've taken the emotion out of it. You know, do I need it? Is it that important? Yeah, we've got to pray about it. There have been hundreds of times we never got back to that store. A real important purchase, right? Number 2, learn to be a saver. Proverbs 13:11. The NIV says, dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow. Learn to be a saver. Number 1, this morning, learn to be generous. Get paid, what do? Give some to the Lord's work. That starts the process. Number 2, give some to yourself. If you start your pay period every year, every month, by giving some to the Lord's work and some to yourself, it'll dictate what you do with the rest of the money the rest of the month. Number 3, learn to spend less than you earn. Proverbs 21:20. The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. That's a paraphrase. Learn to spend less than you earn. Boy, that's real common sense, isn't it? We're not taught that in this culture. Our youngsters aren't taught this. Our government doesn't live by that. When my wife and I got married in 1963, we set our budget. This was our expense side of our budget. This was our income. I'm the automotive industry. I get a raise. We keep the same standard of living. Get a second raise, same standard of living. Keep the third raise. We're building that buffer between income and outgo. We wanted to build the buffer. That's how we did it. That's how everybody should do it. Number 4, don't finance pleasure items. What versus Scripture? Good old-fashioned common sense. One of our principles, we're not going to borrow money to have fun. And we've lived by that. Sure, I love to hunt. I've been in some I killed a lot of pheasants in Ohio. A lot of pheasants in Ohio. I don't know, is there a pheasant left in Ohio? Maybe I killed them all. But I've been in Montana on some hunts. I've been on some great fishing trips in Alaska. Never borrowed a dime to do any of that. Now, do I use credit cards? Sure, absolutely. That floats the cash between paychecks. But that credit card doesn't come out of our wallet unless we know we can pay the bill when we get the bill. Never paid a dime of interest on a credit card. Lord willing, never will. Number 5, have cash emergency fund. Proverbs 21:20 again. Have some money put away that you get at when you have a legitimate financial emergency. Our financial plan said 50% of what we get for cash wedding gifts seeds our emergency fund. We got $1,000 in cash wedding gifts. 1963 was a lot of money. $1,000 cash, a lot of money today. We took $500 and we put it in our savings account. That was for our emergency fund. We both agreed we wouldn't touch it unless we both agreed it was an emergency. Then our goal was to build it from there. Took the other $500 spent on our honeymoon. 1963, that was a nice honeymoon. Today, it wouldn't get you out of Galleon. It's not very far. Number 6, control your credit cards. Turn to your second page. Look at these credit card statistics. There's over 800 million credit cards in service today. Different credit cards. 800 million. 200 million are used every day. Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays included. So in the 50 states, over 200 different credit cards were used today. How much money is being charged on credit cards? 2001, 670 billion. 2013, now it's 2017, 2 trillion. It stayed pretty constant the last 4 years. So we've gone from 670 billion being charged on credit cards to over $2 trillion being charged on credit cards. Presently, as I talk to you tonight, there's over $800 billion at interest on credit card debt. $800 billion generating interest on credit card debt. Average interest rate on that debt is 17%. These are people that are delinquent on their payments, have not kept up with their payments, and their interest rates have jumped. The average is 17%. Some of them are in their 20 percentile. Take that 17% times 800 billion, divide it by 365 days, and you will discover that the credit card industry takes in an average of $373 million a day of interest income only. That's Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays included. It's a cash cow. Average number of credit cards per household is 6. I shared that with a friend of mine. He said, I don't agree with that. You know his name. He said, I don't agree with that. 2 or 3 I would agree, not 6. I said, get out your wallet. He had 11. He will never outlive that. I will never let him live that down. Isn't that right, Jim? No, I wasn't. 60% of credit card holders carry their unpaid balances from month to month. 60% are paying interest on credit cards. Credit card, you study the regs. Once the credit card industry sees you at $800 in debt on a credit card, their statistics tell them they have you for the rest of your life. Because people aren't disciplined to pay that off. If they try to pay it off, they get down to get it paid off, and they'll put another charge on the credit card. And the credit card industry knows that. Look at page 3. If you have a $5,000 credit card debt, you're paying 17% interest. What's your monthly payment? About 1.5% of the outstanding balance, $75 a month. If you pay $75 a month on a $5,000 credit card bill at 17% interest, it'll take you 19 years to pay it off. And you will have paid over $11,500 in interest. Now the purchase costs $11,578 plus 5, so $16,578. Now put that in the savings and you see the difference. Go back to your front page. guy came up to me in Seattle. I was doing a seminar, and he said to me, I'm in a dilemma. I said, what's your dilemma? He says, well, a thief broke into our house and stole my wife's credit cards. I said, when did this happen? He said, about 3 or 4 months ago. I said, don't you think you should cancel the cards? He said, that's my dilemma. He said, the thief spends less money than my wife. Sorry, ladies. But the credit card statistics say women take families into debt in little increments. Men take families into debt in giant leaps. Number 7, have adequate life insurance to protect your loved ones. 1 Timothy 5:8. 1 Timothy 5:8. I'm basically a term man. Have been most of my life. Term insurance means you're just buying protection. There's no cash values. We had our first child. I'm 24 years old. Pam was born, and I immediately went out, got $500,000, 10-level term life insurance. 10-level term stays the same for 10 years, and the premium stays the same for 10 years. I was 24. I did a study of insurance, and obviously the premium goes up every year. If I would have bought it the next year, it would be a little more because I'm older, and they're insuring me for a shorter period of time. It's called actuarial studies. My studies, I found out the biggest increase in premiums on the decade of my birthday. So my 10-level term, 24 to 34, I renewed it when I was 29. So I went from 29 to 49. I went to a 20-level term. It cost more money, but we had that buffer. We could afford to pay it. So I went from 29 to 49, then went from 39 to 59, then went from 49 to 69, then went from 59 to 75. Because I determined that at 75 I didn't need any life insurance. Homes paid for, cars are paid for, pension plans funded. So why need life insurance? That's how you do that. That's how you structure that. Number 8, be self-insured for life insurance at some point. Number 9, have a retirement plan in progress by the time you're 40 years of age. Flip back to page 7. How do you project retirement income? I call it the 80% rule. You want 80% of your current income when you retire. Where's that going to come from since you're not working anymore? Well, start with Social Security. Social Security will be here. Don't believe everything the talking hairdos tell you. Those people on television, they're talking hairdos. That's all they do. Most of them don't have an IQ that even measures on the scale. How's that? It will be here. Why? It has to be here. Think of the consequences. If our government stops paying out to 50 million senior citizens their Social Security checks that they paid into, you wouldn't see a recession. You would see a global depression. Global depression. China would call their loans. Japan would call their loans. Russia would call their loans. You're not taking care of your senior citizens? What makes us think we're going to get our money back? And we couldn't pay those loans. We don't have the cash flow to do that. They'll fix it. It's not that big a fix. Are you aware that if you make, a lot of people make a lot of money in this country. A lot of people make over, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. You pay Medicare tax on whatever you make. Your Social Security tax stops at $128,000 and goes up a little bit every year. So your first $128,000 that you make, I know, I would love to be there. I understand. There's a lot of people that are there. First $128,000, you pay that 6.2% Social Security tax, and then your employer matches that. At $128,000, that stops. There's no more Social Security tax. They'll increase that number. They'll increase it to 150, to 175, 200. They may do what they're doing with Medicare tax. If you make $1 million a year, you pay Social Security tax on $1 million. They may do that. Well, that's going to solve a lot of the problem. They might have to means test it. Donald Trump probably doesn't need Social Security, but he paid into it, so they got to work through that deal. So there's different ways they can fix this thing. The retirement age. When Roosevelt implemented the Social Security system, the average lifespan in the 30s, the average lifespan was 58 years of age. Now the average lifespan is 78 years of age. The system wasn't built on that. And so they'll extend the retirement age to when you can get your benefits. People are living longer, they're working longer. My son, he'll probably won't get his full Social Security until maybe 70 years old. I don't know. That's how they'll extend it. They'll do that. Now, the grandfather for all of us who were there, but the young ones coming up will probably have to wait a little longer to get their full Social Security. So back to your page 7. So you're going to get $21,600 in Social Security benefits. That's probably a little low. This is a $50,000 a year income, so the guy needs $40,000. It's a little low, I understand. So go down to line 5, and he needs another $18,400 to reach his goal of $40,000 of income after he retires. Take $18,400 divided by 0.05%, and find that he needs $368,000, generating 5% a year. That generates $18,400 to reach his goal of $40,000. It's not rocket science. So everybody should be participating in a retirement plan as soon as possible. The sooner you participate, the more you accumulate. It takes discipline. You know, the Christian life is a disciplined life. How can I be expected to be disciplined in my Christian life, but undisciplined in my financial life? That just doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. It's a consistent situation. You know people who work for corporations that have matching pension plans? You put in 6%, they'll match it. Maybe they'll match 3%, maybe they'll match 5%, maybe they'll match the whole 6%. People who work for corporations that have matching pension plan opportunities, 62% of those people do not participate. Think about that. So if you're working for a company like Boeing, a friend of mine is in charge of the HR department at Boeing. It's 50,000 employees. He does seminars to the employees. 37% of the Boeing employees participate in the Boeing match. 63% do not. And it's 6%. So if someone's making $70,000 a year, that's $4,200 a year they're throwing down the sewer because of a lack of discipline. That's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay, back to your front page. Number 9 is Proverbs 13:6 again. Number 10, have a home debt free by the time you retire. My wife and I's goal was to have our home paid for by the time I hit 54, which we were able to do. Folks, we're creatures of habit. If you have a target, chances are you'll hit it. If you don't have a target, you won't hit it. Our target was 54. Number 11, have a workable budget. Oh boy, he's going to talk about budgeting. Yeah, you better believe it. Turn back to page 5. Yeah, I'm big on budgeting. Family, business, church. Everybody needs a budget. Look at page 5. Exercise preparing a budget is more important than attempting to control that budget. I don't care how old you are, I don't care how young you are, I don't care how prosperous you are, I don't care how poor you are. You should have a budget. The process of preparing a budget defines who you are and what's important. The control aspect is mechanical. When the budget becomes inflexible, it's a taskmaster. When it's a guideline to be followed, it's a friend. When you put a budget together, you have to make life choices. How are you going to live? Like I said this morning, it's not how much you make, it's how you want to live. And everybody needs to look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? Do I need all this stuff? What's really important to my well-being so I can honor the Lord with my resources? 4 reasons to live on a budget helps control debt. Number 2, you earn cheaper interest rates because you have a good credit score. Allows you to budget saving for the future. Number 4, biblical counselors tell me that 85% of divorces among believers start with money problems. Biblical counselors tell me 85% of divorces among believers start with money problems. Look at the next page. Page 6, how you do a budget. Teach this to your kids, your grandparents. Teach this to your grandkids. They're not being taught this stuff out there. This little worksheet, I've done this worksheet for over 50 years. Left-hand column, the categories where you spend money. Top of the column, the months of the year. We're coming into September. Round it off to the nearest dollar. Monitor where your money goes by category for the month of September. Do it the month of October and the month of November. Do it for 3 consecutive months. By the 4th month, you begin to commit it to memory. Yeah. And it works. Because we're creatures of habit. We begin to remember it. We begin to think about it. Do it for a whole year, you'll know where your money goes and when it goes there. That's stewardship. Stewardship says, I know where my money goes and when it goes there. I know what bills are yet to be paid for this month of August. I know what bills will be paid in September. October is our biggest cash outgo month in the 12 months. October is the biggest. Why? I pay all my real estate taxes in October. I'm going to deduct it on my tax return. My premium, my life insurance, I don't have life insurance now, but my premium, I did it in my annual premium in October because I got a little bit cheaper premium. So I did it in October. My car insurance, I paid in October. So October's a big month. It doesn't surprise us. We knew it was coming last November because we have the budget worksheet. Teach this to your kids, your grandkids. Oh, you're awful quiet. Number 11 is Proverbs 24, 3 and 4, the workable budget. Number 12 is a difference in debt and obligation. I define debt a little bit different than some people. I don't call a mortgage on a house literal debt. It's debt, but I call it a different kind of debt. I call it an obligation. You borrow money to buy a home, hopefully you're buying and paying for an appreciating asset. You have a monthly payment, it's called an obligation. If you can't make that monthly payment, you have no business borrowing your money in the first place. Credit card debt's bad debt. Credit card debt is bad debt. Yeah. By the way, just so you know, there is no biblical prohibition in this book in borrowing money. Zero. Say that again. From Genesis to Revelation, there is no biblical prohibition to borrowing money. It is not a sin. Some people think that. The verse they use is in Romans chapter 13, owe no man anything. That's the verse they mostly quote. That verse has absolutely nothing to do with money. The text of Romans 13 has nothing to do with money. The text of Romans 13, if someone does something for you, be willing to do more for them. That's the text in Romans 13. It has nothing to do with money. So in my seminars I got a couple weeks ago, I get the question, what do you do with neither a borrower nor a lender be? I said to the guy, I said, boy, that's pretty good. Give me the text. He said, I don't remember. I said, I know you don't. That's Shakespeare. He's dead on a doornail and he was never inspired. No biblical prohibition to borrowing money. Zero. The biblical admonition is if you borrow it, pay it back. That's the point. Number 13. I understand the tax law applies to you. Matthew 22 says, I'm to pay my taxes. Watch out for tax protesters. They are ungodly people. They are anti-government. I have a biblical responsibility to pay my taxes. The taxes that I'm due to pay. That's Matthew 22, 15 to 22. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. I am to pay my taxes. Now, as I said this morning, our ministry is tax returns for pastors and missionaries. So my bedtime reading is Master Tax Guide. If you can't sleep at night, I recommend you get a copy. You won't get through the first 2 paragraphs and you'll sleep like a baby. You understand what it says, you'll wake up every 2 hours and cry, probably. Number 14, have an estate plan that includes a will and living trust. Look at page 4 for a minute. What is a credit score? Everybody in this room has one. Goes from 300 to 850. 720 or higher is the best rating and results in the lowest interest. What's the big deal? A person with a 720 score versus a person with a 520 score on a $100,000 mortgage can save as much as $85,000 on interest for the life of that loan because of a good credit score. They can pay as much as $235 less a month because they got a good credit score. You go to borrow money from a lender, how do they know to loan you money? How do they know that you're not a deadbeat? How they know they'll get their money back? Your credit score tells them that. They know everything about us. Everything about us. What impacts your credit score? Late payments have the biggest impact. Don't use more than a third of your available credit. Let's say you have 3 credit cards. Let's say you can charge up to $2,500 on each credit card. So you can charge a total of $7,500 on 3 credit cards. Credit card industry uses the 1/3 ratio. Let's say you owe $1,250 on this one, $1,250 on this one, and nothing on this one. So you owe $2,500 and you have $7,500 of available credit. $2,500 over $7,500 is 1/3. Credit card industry says you're okay. You're not using the 3rd credit card, so you cancel it. So now you owe $2,500 and you have $5,000 of available credit. What happened to your ratio? It went from 1/3 to 1/2. Your credit score plummets. Because the credit card industry says you now become a greater risk. That's how they do that. Folks, they know everything about us today. And there are no secrets. Let's say you have 5 creditors. Let's say you have 3 credit cards that you owe money on. Let's say you have a car loan and a home loan. And you're late on this one. All 5 can be notified. Let's say you're late on this one the 2nd month. Stronger notice can go out. 3rd month, you go on report. And the credit score begins to go down. Late payments have the biggest impact on use more than 30 of your available credit. Consolidating loans and canceling credit cards can be a negative for that reason. Look for mistakes in your credit report. You can download it at least once a year. Sometimes they'll say you were late when you weren't late. Sometimes they'll show a loan on there that's not your loan. They make mistakes too. In other words, treat your credit as a valuable asset. Flip over to page 8. Do you have page 8? Buying automobiles? Is that in there? Okay. Sometimes I include it, sometimes I don't. This is how I bought my cars for years. I call it 2-4 junk. People remember my seminars by 2-4 junk. I buy cars 1.5 to 2 year olds for years and years and years. Buy cars 1.5 to 2 years old, drive them 4 years and get rid of them. We started that as part of our financial plan. I was in the automotive industry, so I was thinking about cars. I buy my cars from the lease outlets. Hertz, Avis, Budget, National Car. That's where I buy my cars. They all have regional sales outlets. First time I did it, this is actually how I did it. First year I went on, bought a 2-year-old car, paid $14,000 for it, put $4,000 down. Financed the balance of $313 a month for 36 months. So I had it structured so I paid it off in 3 years. 2-4 junk, I'm keeping it 4 years. So the 4th year I continued making my payment in the savings account. So in the 4th year, saved like $3,600, interest like $100. Now you get 40-45% of what I paid for the car when I sell it. It's a 6-year-old car now. So if I get $6,300 for it, now I got $10,000. Now I did it the 2nd time. Went out and bought a car, now it's $16,000 because of appreciation, inflation. So I put $10,000 down. I financed the balance of $6,000 for 1.5 years because the payment was pretty much the same. So I made my car payment for 1.5 years. At the end of 1.5 years, owned the car, kept the car for 4 years. For the next 2.5 years, put that payment in the savings account. My wife and I put $275 aside every month for car replacement. Get cash for our cars. Buy them from the lease outlets. That's where I buy them. You know what? Those are good cars. You know why? Let's say I drove into Cleveland to speak here this weekend. And I'm renting a car. And I'm renting a car from Budget. And I'm driving from Cleveland to Galvin. And the car breaks down. I'm not a very happy camper with Budget. I'll probably never rent another car from them. They know that. So those cars are well maintained. I've done this process for over 40 years. I've never bought a lemon because they are well maintained automobiles. So I did it. Okay. Let's go back to your secret page. Wills and Trust. Go to your estate planning seminar. Okay, you got it there? Where's the back? Stewardship is not just money, time, or talent. Stewardship is all of these and more. Stewardship is the very life God has given us, and someday we should be responsible and accountable all to Him. That's out of David Jeremiah's book on finance. How many of you know David Jeremiah? Yeah, How many of you listen to him? Yeah, he's a very good friend. By the way, he grew up in Toledo. I don't know if you knew that. His dad was the president of Cedarville for 25 years. James T. Jeremiah. So I've known the family for years and years and years. Two precious freedoms: right to accumulate an estate, right to give it away before and after you die. $250 million per week goes into probate court, and designated millions of dollars a year go into federal and state treasuries because people die without wills and without heirs. 30% of adults have a will written correctly. 30%, which means 70% do not. Less than 10% of adults have done any serious estate planning. 11 of 12 women will become widows and will be widows for an average of 11 and a half years. Think about that one, ladies. Why spend 40 years acquiring an estate, 10 years trying to conserve it for retirement, but not 2 hours on what you're going to do with it when you pass away? Shake up any notion you need to be rich for an estate plan. If you're like most Christians, tax considerations take a far back seat to the top priority of estate planning, taking care of your heirs in the Lord's work. What's at stake is perhaps best seen by conjuring up the mess you can leave behind if you procrastinate all the way to the grave and die without a will or living trust. Your state's rules of intestacy provide a one-size-fits-all estate plan for you. Now, folks, you either have had a will prepared or the state of Ohio has one prepared for you. Every state has a will prepared by its legislature that applies to you if you don't have any estate planning. In your state, at your death, at the second death, it's not the first death. Passing the estate from spouse to spouse is not difficult. It's the second death. After the second death, if you don't have any estate planning, the state of Ohio, it will pass according to their rules under probate law. Contrast that to the almost unlimited flexibility that's yours if you write a comprehensive estate plan, including a will, living trust. You have the right to name the guardian of your choice. You can slice a pie however you choose. You want grandmother's hutch to go to a favorite niche or home to your church? No problem, if you have an estate plan. Page 2. I won't cover all this. I want to go down to the middle, guardianship. You nominate guardians if you have minor children under the age of 18. They are called minors. Something happens to mom and dad, they need guardians. Mom and dad, you nominate guardians. You don't appoint them. A judge has final say. He appoints them. So anytime a couple passes away, or the husband and then the wife, and there's no parents left, and those kids are minors, they can go into a guardianship situation that's controlled by a judge. About 10 years ago in Connecticut, there was a lawsuit. Two couples lived across the street from each other. One was a pastor and his wife, godly church, godly pastor, I knew them. And across the street was a member of their church, a guy and a gal, and they had a 3-year-old daughter. The guy and the gal did their estate planning, and they nominated the pastor's wife to take care of the 3-year-old if something was to happen to them. Well, they were both killed in an accident. The pastor's wife assumed they'd get the little girl. They took her in. The lady on their block wrote a letter to social services saying the pastor and his wife were religious fanatics. Social service came in, took the little girl, and put her in a foster home. The pastor's wife took them to court and lost. Took them to appellate court and lost. Took it to the Connecticut Supreme Court and lost. They lost all the way. The judge had final say. They were encouraged to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Problem with that is getting on the docket. And then number 2, getting adjudicated. Could have taken years. By that time, the girl's probably a teenager, and the court probably wouldn't have taken her out of that foster home even if they had won the case. So they wrote an article. Appeared in World Magazine. Here's what they recommend under guardianship. Favor relatives or third parties wherever possible. Obviously, the number 1 criteria is a godly home. If you don't have a relative that has a godly home, then you've got to step outside of the relatives. And that's why you have churches like this. Number 2, develop a relationship between the child and the person you've named. We told our kids when we did our estate planning, Pam and Jim, we said, now if something happens to mom and dad, Uncle Don and Aunt Peg are you knew mom and dad. That became an issue when we disciplined them. They wanted to go down that. We told them it doesn't work like that. Number 3, name at least 3 potential guardians. Primary, alternate number 1, alternate number 2. Why? Very difficult for a judge to turn down all 3. Then you could write a testimonial in your estate planning, in your will, as to why you chose the guardians you chose. Could be for family reasons, financial reasons, spiritual reasons. You're giving the judge all the information that you would want him to have if you were still here, to make a decision you would want him to make of who gets those kids. Important issue, folks. It's an important issue. Go to page 3. Go to the bottom of page 3. If you have a will now, check to see if they're going to change your marital status. Second marriages become very complex. 2 separate families. Has it ever been a change in your health status? Maybe you've been diagnosed with a fatal disease. Make sure your estate planning's in order. Have you moved to another state since making your will? Wills are a state-by-state issue. Living trusts are federal. I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you live in Ohio and you had your will drafted, say, in Michigan, you probably ought to make sure it fits Ohio statutes. Number 4, your beneficiary is still living. Are they still worthy? Number 5, you want to keep the same. Number 5, you want to keep the same executor, guardian, or trustee of your estate. Number 6, do you still own the specific properties that have been mentioned? I did a seminar in Idaho. The guy was a widower. He had 2 apartment houses and he had 2 sons. So his estate planning said, I'm going to leave this apartment to this kid and this one to this one. And he sold the 1 apartment house. I forgot to amend his estate planning. And then he said in the seminar, and he went, oh, light went on. So he got his house in order. Number 7, has your family secure enough to make you to switch some bequests from them to charitable organizations? We've told our kids, my son-in-law is a physician, my son's a CPA. We told our kids, as you get on financially, we're probably going to leave less to you and more to the Lord's work. They won't come to my seminars anymore. They have to get their legs cut off. Number 8, you then may need to review your estate planning with your attorney. Page 4. This is an important page. What to do in the case of the death of your spouse. I did a seminar in Montana, and I was living in Seattle at the time, or Tri-Cities. And I went in to do the weekend, and they asked me to stay over because 2 women had become widows within the previous couple of weeks, and they wanted me to stay and talk with them. So I did. Came home that next night, Tuesday night, sat down at the dining room table, and I said, honey, I want to make sure you know what to do if something happens to me. So we got all our documents together. Started with our marriage license, pension plans, titles to the 2 cars, deed to the property. All that's paperwork. We put it in a file. Put a rubber band around it. And then we answered all these questions on a piece of 8.5 by 14 yellow pad paper. Took those answers, wrapped them around the documents, put them in the safe deposit box. Something happens to me, my wife goes to the safe deposit box, puts that paperwork on her dining room table. She knows exactly where everything is at. She knows exactly what she has to do. After she grieves, of course. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. When she's in the audience, she just rolls her eyes. There it goes again. No, she knows exactly what to do. My son is the successor trustee of our trust. He's on the signature card of the safe deposit box. If something happens to my wife and I as we travel, he goes to the safe deposit box, gets the documents, lays them on his dining room table. He knows exactly what to do. He knows where everything is at. He knows the decisions he has to make based on what the trust tells him to do. Every one of you should go through this exercise. Every one of you. Page 5. Now let's talk about the living trust. My wife and I were concerned about the delay of probate and the cost of probate. It takes typically 9.5 months to probate a will. It can take longer if there's any glitch. Can this be as much as 5%, $1,500 of the estate to probate a will? Costs money, takes time. So I said, okay, we're going to put together a living trust. It's called the Rickard Family Trust. Your trust would be your last name, living trust. My wife and I are co-trustees. We control the trust. It is our trust. We can change the trust however we want, as long as one of us are alive. I die, she's survivor trustee, nothing changes regarding the trust. She dies, I survive, I'm the survivor trustee, nothing changes. She dies, I die, the trust now is no longer revocable, it is irrevocable. It is cast in concrete. My son is a successor trustee. He cannot change the trust. All he can do is carry out our instructions in the trust. It's a contract. Then my wife and I funded the trust with our deeded and titled assets. My wife and I don't own our condominium in California. It's not owned by James W. and Joan E. Rickard. It's owned by the Rickard Family Trust. When I had life insurance, the beneficiary of my life insurance was not my wife. It was the Rickard Family Trust. Why is that? I die, she inherits the life insurance, she puts it in her checking account, then she dies, you're back to probate. When the trust is the beneficiary of the life insurance, it's in the trust, there's no probate. She has access to it as though it was in her name because she's the survivor trustee. When you do a living trust, what you put in the trust is not probated. You've taken probate out of your life. You've taken the government out of your life. Our checking account says Rickard Family Trust, James W., Joan E. Rickard trustees. So when we put money in our checking account, it's owned by the Rickard Family Trust. We write checks just like you do. We just sign the checks as trustee. Have a little savings account. It's in the Rickard Family Trust. Have a little stock. The stockbroker has a copy of our trust. When he buys stock, he buys it into the trust. When he sells stock, he sells it out of the trust. Let me say it to you like this. When you pass away with a will, you pass the ownership of your estate under probate law. The probate court's in charge. The government is in charge. When you have a living trust, and you fund the living trust, and you pass away, you pass the ownership of your assets under contract law. My wife and I have a living trust. It's a contract honored by all 50 states. It's not a state-by-state issue. It's federal. Let's say my wife and I live in Ohio, and we have a home in Gallion. And we're snowbirds. So we have a home in Florida or Arizona. And we pass away with a will. You got probate in Ohio on that home. You got probate in Florida on that home. Let's say you put the home in Florida into the living trust. And you put the home in Gallion in the living trust and you pass away. It's a contract. You don't have probate in either state. It passes by contract. Passes by contract. Look at your page 5. Look at the advantages of a local living trust. Whatever's in the trust bypasses probate. There's no probate. There will be minimal or no attorney fees at death. Attorney fees are when you have the trust prepared. The receipt distribution can take place immediately, the next day. You can revoke it or change it any time as long as one are alive. Larry is confidential. Are you aware that wills are a matter of public record? That's how charlatans get the widows. Wills are a matter of public record. Trusts are confidential. Confidential to the heirs, to the beneficiaries, the heirs, and the trust officers. Nobody else has access. It's confidential. That's important right there. Letter F, very difficult to contest a trust successfully. Very difficult because it's a contract. Wills are easily contested. Mom and dad ignored me. Mom and dad were not of sound mind. Whatever. That's why they're contested. Living trust is a contract. Very, very, very difficult to contest that successfully. Disadvantages of a revocable living trust. All property wished to be distributed to the trust must be put into the trust. You have to fund the trust. The trust must be maintained over your lifetime. You buy a piece of property, you buy it into the trust. You buy a life insurance policy, you name the trust the beneficiary. Trusts are more expensive to create. You want to find an attorney? You want to find a Christian attorney if you can? Who does trusts? How would you locate one around here? There's probably somebody here who's already used one successfully. Call Cedarville's Development Department. This is what they do. Say, give me the name of a Christian attorney in the Gallion area. They'll know. They'll know who to refer you to. Page 6. Powers of attorney. Look at the third one and the fourth one. Healthcare and durable. My dad died in a hospital, Ann Arbor, Michigan, in 1986, heart attack. In 1984, I was visiting from the state of Washington, and he knew he was in trouble. Nitroglycerin wasn't working anymore, and he knew things were not good. So he said, Jim, I don't want to be on life support. And knowing what I do, he said, I want to give you my health care power of attorney. Because I don't want to be on self support. I don't want to give it to mom, because she'll be a basket case. I said, okay. So I fly into Detroit, take me over to Michigan, go in the room, meet with 2 cardiologists. He's brain dead. He's gone. He's on life support. So with my brother, my sister, my mother, and I said, take him off life support. So we did. 5 years later, my mother's diagnosed with dementia. My brother, she was in Cedarville with my brother. He was the vice president there. And I said, Don, go down and get her durable power of attorney. So he did. My brother transacted business for my mother until she died. Pretty slick. Now you've got the HIPAA agreement. Look at the bottom, HIPAA. It's a Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act that came into being in 2007. Are you aware? I'm traveling. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm hospitalized. My wife cannot get access to my health condition unless that hospital has a signed HIPAA agreement. Are you aware of that? It's the law of the land. It's the law of the land. So our attorney prepared HIPAA agreements for my wife and I. We made copies of them. My son has his copies. My daughter has her copies. My wife has copies. I have copies. If something happens to one of us, they can get access. Just email or fax the HIPAA agreement to the doctor or to the hospital. That's the law of the land, folks. Law of the land. Okay. Questions? Yes, sir.
You was talking about your trust funds and a living trust. Does that keep say you put all your assets into a trust and cash, right? You put cash in there.
Well, I have a checking account.
Yeah, as your checking account or savings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you go into a nursing home and they want to take your money to spend it,
they can pierce that.
It was that?
They can pierce that.
They can pierce it. Okay.
Yes, it doesn't. Only irrevocable trusts prevent that. And you got to do it, I think it's 5 years before that situation in the nursing home.
Okay.
Yeah, the living trust is revocable because it's revocable spirit. It doesn't save you from creditors because it's revocable. They can pierce it.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is it called if you, what's the trust called that the nursing home one that they can't pierce?
Well, it would be the irrevocable trust. Yeah. You got to remember though, you do an irrevocable trust, you're casting it into concrete. You can't change it. So you don't do people typically, an irrevocable trust would be like if you have a handicapped child. You want to make sure they're taken care of the rest of their life. When you could buy life insurance, the proceeds then go into the irrevocable trust. Nobody can pierce that. You have to take care of the youngster for the rest of their life. That's one reason why you do an irrevocable trust. Anybody else? Okay, go to your last page. Issues for senior citizens. You hear this all the time, but I'm just going to remind you because we're all together. Guard your Social Security number. Frauds are active today. People in law enforcement tell me it's the most volatile era for frauds that they can remember. And a lot of it's foreign countries, foreigners. Don't ever give personal, yes?
So what is the best against that?
What's that?
What is the best to guard against that?
You don't give out your Social Security number to anybody, unless you know them personally.
Can you just like over the internet or over the phone?
Right, over the internet, over the phone, right. Don't give personal information over the telephone. Be careful what you throw in the garbage. Shred it. IRS never emails you about your return and inform you of a refund. You get a call from the IRS and they try to threaten you, just tell them to drop dead and hang up. If it's really IRS, I'll visit you in jail. They don't call you, they do not email you. Those are frauds. They're after your Social Security number. Beware of people offering great deals for you to invest your money. If you've been taken, swallow your pride and report it. Don't use the ATM machine unless it's your bank. Why pay a fee to use your money? Don't be afraid to ask for the senior discount when you shop. Let me throw another one out. I met with 5 executives from the Bank of America, which is the largest bank in California. They know of my ministry, so I bank there, so I know them. So I called for a meeting, and I said to them, I want to ask you just one question. Tell me the difference between a debit card and a credit card. And I knew what the answer was, but I wanted to hear from them. What's the difference between a debit card and a credit card? All 5 of them. All 5 of them. Never use their debit cards with the exception of getting money out of their checking account at their branch. They never use their debit cards for normal purchases. That is the #1 target for fraud. And if somebody pierces your debit card, they pierce your checking account because it's all tied together. Credit cards are not tied to your checking account. Only debit cards are. So I said to them, I said, okay, all right, tell me this again. Tell me this again. All 5 of you. These are the executives at Bank of America. Tell me this again. We never use our debit cards other than getting cash out of our checking account at our branch. It's the only time they use it. And they said to me, and I've done some research, if you're defrauded on your debit card from somebody that lives in the United States, your chances of getting your money back are fairly good. It'll take months. If you're defrauded on your debit card from a foreigner, you will never get your money back. That's what they said to me. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yes?
Debit card can be used as debit or credit.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, I would check credit, not debit.
I mean, so that could be a factor.
It could be a problem. Yeah, I would ask your bank. I'd ask your credit card holder, Citibank, whoever it is. I'd say you want to make sure you've got protection. Yeah, I would do a little research on that. Yeah. Now I know you just have to check debit or credit. I would check credit. I wouldn't check debit.
That's all they would use, but I didn't know what the ramifications were.
Yeah. Debit cards are attached to your checking account. That's why it's a debit card. It comes right out of your checking account. That's why it's easy to get approval. Because it's right tied to your checking account. Yeah. You just word of the wise. Yes.
Credit card, you also get to keep you get to keep your money for an extra 30 days.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so is it not safe to use your debit card in an ATM machine in a different state?
Yes.
That is safe, or
They said they would not use their debit cards for that purpose. Gotta remember, crooks are slick today. They know how to beat the system. That's all they do with their time, is figuring out how to beat the system. You can go, I have a billfold. I have my debit card in there and my credit card. You can't pierce this electronically. It's an electronically guarded billfold. You can't, they have ways now of reading your numbers through your billfold. That's how sophisticated they are. I'm at the bank the other day, and I'm waiting in line to make a deposit, and this elderly lady's in front of me, and she's flashing her credit card. I could read her name and the account number, and I said, ma'am, don't do that. Hide your credit card. Oh, she said, I didn't know that. She goes to the window, I went to my window. And she was right next to me. So she says to the teller, she says, I'll be right back. So she comes over and gives me a hug. She goes back. So we get down to our business, we're walking out of the bank. She gives me another hug. I got 2 hugs. She didn't have a clue. She just flashed that thing out there. And, yeah. Yes?
Just remark about using a debit card or credit card, like at a store, like the grocery store or whatever. I use my debit card. I always put it as credit, but But it still does come immediately out of my checking account.
Yeah, if
For
it's,
instance, that we do have the.
yeah, that means it's, your checking account is subject to that card, yeah. I would just do some inquiry with your card holder. I mean, who handles your card? I would just do some inquiry. I would like to think that as time goes down, the banks will figure out how to protect that. I mean, they're working overtime to try to make sure people don't get cheated. But that's what they told me, and this was 6 months ago. Yes, sir.
One of the things that we do, we can do this easily by contacting your credit card company or your bank, is if you have a smartphone, the moment you make your purchase,
Sure.
it pops up on your text message. So you know if someone is sold your credit card number or your debit card number, you'll know immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, they're getting
purchase, it's going to pop up.
Yeah, they're getting more protection oriented because of all the fraud. But yeah, the investigators have told me that it's epidemic today. It's worse than they've ever seen it. Yeah.
So
Yes.
you're saying if you go to a restaurant, don't give them your credit card or debit card, pay cash.
Well, no, I use a credit card. I use a credit card all the time. I don't use a debit card.
If they're looking at it, they can write it down and pay it.
Yeah, my debit card doesn't come out of my wallet. I use a credit card. Yeah, I tell the bank I want separate cards. I want a debit card and I want a credit card. And I don't use the debit. I use a debit card only to get cash out of my account at the branch. Yeah.
Brother Jim, he was asking, I think, about the fear of the server taking your credit card back and being able to write down your credit card number.
Right.
So that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, they can do that. Sure. Yeah, they just take a blank piece of paper and put it on your credit card and rub it with a pencil and they got everything. Yeah. Yeah. All I'm saying is a financial plan for your life. That's the 14 steps of financial freedom. Okay? Yes?
Should everything that you own, car, finances, and everything be put in the trust? In a trust?
If you have a car, you don't put cars in a trust. Cars pass ownership. Something happens to your husband, you just go down to DMV and with a death certificate to transfer the car to your name. Only if it's an antique car. If it's an antique car, then you put it in the living trust. But a normal car, you don't do that. You don't have to do that. Retirement plans don't go into a living trust. You pass the ownership of retirement plans by beneficiary. If you put your retirement plan into a living trust, IRS can take the position you have redeemed it and they'll make you pay tax on it. So you pass the ownership of your retirement plan by beneficiary, not through the living trust. And when an attorney prepares a living trust for you, they do also what is known as a pour-over will, P-O-U-R. That's a mechanism that protects you in case you forgot to do something in the trust, like guardianship. Guardianship cannot be handled through a living trust. Guardianship has to be done through a will. In that case, it'd be a pour-over will because the judge has to be involved. Yes?
What kind of things does seniors put into a living trust?
Seniors, their home, their checking account, their savings account, their stock portfolio that's not a retirement plan. They have one. Yeah, but for sure their home. Yeah.
Like a Timothy plan and those kind of things do or do not go in a trust?
Timothy plan would not go, it would pass by beneficiary. Yeah.
What if both you and the beneficiary die in one accident?
Well, I'll tell you.
Like for the retirement?
Yeah, my wife and I are co-trustees. If both of us are killed, my son's successor. My daughter's the next successor. My son-in-law is the third successor. I would have a succession plan on beneficiary in case you were all killed in the same accident. Sure. Otherwise, it passes by will or by living trust or by the state of Ohio. Yeah, I would have. Yeah, if you want to protect, my retirement plan has 3 beneficiaries. My wife's the first one, my son's the second one, my son-in-law's the third one. Because the chances of all of us getting killed is better with my son and daughter than it is with my son and son-in-law. Chances of us being in the same accident are pretty slim.
You don't like him.
Yes.
The living rules is what determines like medically, not.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and that's different in every state, is that correct?
Yeah, every state does the living rule a little bit differently.
But I'm saying like.
Durable power of health. Yeah, the durable power of health can take care of the durable power of attorney can take care of the living will issue. You don't want to be on life support. In California, it's a durable power of health.
Okay, my question is if like if we go to Florida in the winter and our living wills from Ohio will not be accepted in Florida,
What won't be accepted in Florida?
our living wills made in Ohio.
Yeah.
The hospital we went to said they wanted to accept it.
So what will they accept?
You gotta sign it, you gotta do a Florida.
Then you need to do a Florida one. You're spending time in Florida? Yeah. You were, right?
Since you can't give me money and can't go to hospital, I just stay home.
You know, it's just because of all the legal issues that, you know, every time you have a legal issue occur, then it's overkill. Then nobody wants to be exposed, so you come up with new laws and regulations, and it's just a pain in the neck. But that's our society we live in. Yes?
Would you suggest, or do you recommend having different accounts in multiple banks?
No,
Or should we limit ourselves to one?
No, you're insured up to $250,000 with each account. So no, you don't have to have a multiple bank. If you're a multi-millionaire, you probably would want to think about that. Yeah, but no, you're federally insured for up to $250,000 for each account at every bank. That's why they're federally insured. That's why they're part of the FDIC. But you don't have to have multiple banks. No. Yes.
My brain's all over it. Okay, if you have a will, and, you know, you put everything in there that goes to your spouse, to your children, and eventually, why do you need a trust?
Passing the estate from spouse to spouse is not difficult. It's the second death. Passing an estate from myself to my wife is not the difficult issue. The difficult issue is that I die, she gets the estate, she dies. That's where it gets complex. That's where the living trust becomes very important. Because you don't want your estate to go through probate. So to avoid probate, you do the living trust. The living trust circumvents probate. That's the advantage of it.
But like in the will, it says that if we both go, then it goes to our kids.
It's what now?
So if both of us go at the same time, then it goes to our
But
children.
it'd have to be probated to get there. Your will would have to be probated to get to the kids.
What about the TODs?
State of Ohio allows for a TOD under deed.
Say that again?
The state of Ohio allows to have a joint survivor deed on your property and a TOD simultaneously to your children.
So you have to do that document.
You have to do, well, most of the time you're at your attorney's office, he will do a joint survivor deed and make sure you have one. You can now add your children as TOD on the same document. It's one fee, $25 for this work.
Yeah, but the average person never sees that attorney. That's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah, if you got an attorney, he will take care of that succession for you. But if you don't have the attorney, then you're exposed to the probate process. There's no other alternative. Yeah.
One of the things on the gentleman that asked about the pension, I would suggest having conversations with your children that are going to inherit the pension or your IRA to have a conversation with them about doing the stretch and not just taking the cash.
Well, here's another thing to think about. Let's say your estate's worth $600,000. You have a home, you have a retirement plan, maybe some cash, worth $600,000. And you want to give a third of that, say, to your church. If your kids inherit a pension plan, they have to pay tax on that. Pension plans are tax deferred, not tax exempt. IRS is going to get their pound of flesh at some point. So if you're going to give a third of your estate to your church when you die, and a third of your estate consists of a retirement plan, and then the rest is your home and some other assets, what third would you give to your church? The retirement plan. Because churches don't pay tax. So now you've passed that retirement plan to your church tax-free. You've passed the other $400,000 of your estate to your kids tax-free. The government doesn't get a dime.
Amen.
That's the way you would do that. Remember, if you pass your retirement, if your retirement beneficiary at your death is your kids, they're going to pay tax on that retirement plan. That retirement plan is tax deferred, not tax exempt. But if you give that retirement plan to the Lord's work, there is no tax. Because churches are tax exempt. Non-profits are tax exempt. Charities are tax exempt. So you would pass it to a charity. That's how you would do that. Yes, sir.
Another good avenue today is to do a qualified distribution by giving money directly to your church. It actually enhances the.
You can do $100,000 a year if you're over 70. You can give it right out of your retirement plan, right out of your IRA, right into the church, and it doesn't go through your tax return. It doesn't tax by the state of Ohio. Yeah, you can do that.
And still take advantage of your $24,000 joint deduction.
Tax return, the tax law this year is going to hit some people big time that are not expecting it. You lost your exemptions this year. There are no longer exemptions. You have a $24,000 standard deduction, but your $4,050 for each one of your dependents and yourself and your wife is gone. That no longer is part of the tax law. Yeah.
But if you're currently tithing to your church.
Pardon?
But if you're currently tithing to your church and you're also taking distributions from your IRA.
Right.
You can then still essentially get a tax deduction without getting a tax deduction.
No, you can't.
Yes.
No, you cannot.
Yes.
If you hold it. If you transfer money from your IRA directly to the charity. Okay, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about taking a distribution, having it made directly to your church. The check never gets paid out to you. You take it, let's say you're doing an R&D.
Okay.
Required minimum distribution. You tell your institution to make a check directly payable to your charity, your church. So now you've given that $10,000, $20,000, whatever dollar donation you wanted to give away. It never came to you. It went directly to your church. So it still qualifies under the IRS code as you took your distribution.
Right, that's correct. You mean your required minimum distribution?
Well, any distribution.
Yeah, that's true.
Any distribution, and you still get your $24,000 standard write-off because
that's correct. That's correct. That's a different issue. Yeah, that's correct.
But it's still, you're still technically getting that itemized deduction for a charitable gift, is what I'm saying.
Well, they're getting rid of Schedule A. That's what they're doing. They're eventually going to get rid of Schedule A. They're eliminating the property taxes and the state income taxes now, which you can deduct on your Schedule A. That's their goal. Get rid of it. It's good for a lot of people, not going to be good for some people. It's going to be an interesting tax year.
Yeah, well, in a 401k plan, when I'm 70 and a half now, they have to require me to take money out of my 401k every year.
Right.
Is there some way that you can avoid?
Yeah, give it directly from your IRA to the charity, to the church.
That's what it's just.
Yeah, and that fulfills your required minimum distribution, your R&D. Yeah, you can get it directly from your IRA to the charity, and it doesn't go through your tax return.
Now, would you recommend taking more out than the minimum amount, or less
I
out?
would take as much out that favored me on my tax bracket.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you want to calculate your taxes and see where you're at.
Yeah.
If you're at zero tax, you want to take as much out to keep it zero tax. Absolutely. Because somebody's going to have to pay tax on that at some point. Yeah, sure. Good questions. Good comments. Thank you. All right. Jim, it's all yours.
Thank you, Brother Jim, for your time and spending
Sure.
time with us.
Thank you.
to be in the missions room for 3 days if you want to continue asking questions. Or maybe not. Jesus commands us to render unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto the Lord what is Lord's, but it's poor stewardship to give more to Caesar than we're required. Would you agree with that, Brother Jim?
That's right.
So the things that Brother Jim talked about, some of it is detailed, some of it takes time, but I can promise you the Lord will be honored and glorified if we use our finances in a way that would be good stewardship. And your spouse and your children will appreciate it too. If you have some more questions, I can give you an email address. We can talk to Brother Jim and ask those questions. Thank you for being here tonight. Let's go ahead and close our time of prayer.